Kevin Anderson stood in front of his boss's office, listening to words that felt like a punch to the gut. "Congratulations, Kevin. We're promoting Rachel to senior manager." Mark Thompson's smile didn't reach his eyes as he delivered the news that would change everything. Kevin's hand instinctively moved to the manila envelope in his briefcase, the one he'd prepared 3 months ago, hoping he'd never need it. "Rachel?" Kevin's voice remained steady, though his world was crumbling. "The Rachel who's been here 6 months? She brings fresh perspective and strong leadership qualities," Mark replied, avoiding eye contact. Kevin thought about Rachel scrolling through TikTok during team meetings, arriving 20 minutes late with Starbucks excuses, asking Kevin to quickly review her code because she wasn't great with debugging yet. Have you ever felt like a chess piece being moved around by someone who doesn't even know how to play the game? That's exactly how Kevin felt as he processed the absurdity. 8 years of 16-hour days, weekend sacrifices, and missed family dinners, all overlooked for someone who treated the office like her personal social media studio. But Kevin had been preparing for this moment longer than anyone realized. 3 months ago, when he first noticed the subtle signs of workplace politics shifting against him, he'd started documenting everything. Every late-night emergency he'd handled alone, every innovative solution he'd developed, every time his ideas mysteriously appeared in someone else's presentation. The envelope contained more than just a resignation letter. It contained the truth about TechFlow solutions that would make heads roll. Kevin had always been the reliable one, the guy who arrived first and left last, who single-handedly saved the Omega project when their database crashed at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. While his colleagues went home to their families, Kevin stayed behind, fingers flying across his keyboard, solving problems that others couldn't even understand. He'd built the security framework that saved the company $500,000 annually, led a team of 15 engineers with 0 turnover, and never once complained about the thankless overtime. But dedication has a price. Last month, when Kevin finally made it home at 11 p.m., after another emergency that only he could fix, he found his 7-year-old daughter Emma asleep at the kitchen table, still wearing her school uniform. Sarah, his wife, looked up from her cold dinner with tired eyes. "She waited 3 hours for you to help with her math homework," Sarah whispered. "I told her Daddy was saving the company again, but I don't think she believes me anymore." The irony wasn't lost on Kevin. While he was building systems that protected millions of dollars in digital assets, he was failing to protect the most important assets in his life, his relationship with his daughter and wife. Every sacrifice had been made with the promise of future recognition, future security, future happiness. The promotion to senior manager was supposed to be that future. Kevin's expertise went beyond just coding. 6 months earlier, he'd discovered a critical backdoor vulnerability in their legacy system, a security flaw that could have cost the company everything. Instead of immediately reporting it and risking blame for not catching it sooner, Kevin had quietly patched it himself during a marathon weekend session. He'd saved the company from potential disaster, and nobody even knew it happened. "Kevin, you're incredibly talented," Mark continued, his voice taking on that patronizing tone that managers use when they're about to deliver bad news. "But Rachel represents the leadership style we need for the future. She's more collaborative." Collaborative. Kevin almost laughed. Rachel's idea of collaboration was forwarding Kevin's technical proposals to Mark with her name in the subject line. Just last week, Kevin had spent 40 hours developing the AI optimization strategy that could revolutionize their data processing. Rachel had presented it to the board, stumbling through technical terms she clearly didn't understand, while Kevin watched from the back of the room like a ghost at his own funeral. Anyone who's ever poured their heart into their work knows that moment when you realize your loyalty means nothing to the people making decisions. Kevin felt that crushing realization as Mark shuffled papers on his desk, already moving on to his next meeting. 8 years of Kevin's life reduced to incredibly talented, the corporate equivalent of thoughts and prayers. But Kevin had learned something important during those 8 years. Always keep receipts. Every email thread where his ideas were discussed, every timestamp showing when he submitted solutions, every piece of code with his digital signature. The envelope in his briefcase contained a comprehensive timeline that would make very uncomfortable reading for several people in the company hierarchy. The meeting that would change everything was tomorrow morning. Kevin had seen the calendar invite. Promotion committee decision. Confidential. He already knew what that decision would be. Just like he knew about the weekly after-hours meetings between Rachel and Mark that had nothing to do with project planning. The signs had been there for months. Kevin being excluded from strategic discussions despite his 8 years of institutional knowledge, his suggestions dismissed with increasing frequency, his workload mysteriously increasing, while Rachel's seemed to evaporate. When Kevin got home that night, Emma was already asleep, but she'd left a drawing on his pillow. It showed their family at the park. Daddy, Mommy, and Emma on the swings. At the bottom, in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, she'd written, "Daddy working too much makes me sad." Kevin stared at the drawing for a long time, thinking about all the birthday parties he'd missed, all the bedtime stories Sarah had to read alone, all the soccer games where Emma looked for him in the stands and found an empty seat. The next morning brought the confirmation Kevin expected. Rachel Martinez, 6 months of employment, a resume that looked impressive until you tried to verify the technical claims, and a networking strategy that involved strategic coffee runs and perfectly timed compliments. She would be leading the team that Kevin had built, implementing strategies Kevin had developed, managing projects Kevin had designed from the ground up. Have you ever watched someone else get credit for a house you built with your own hands? That's what it felt like when Mark announced Rachel's promotion to the team. Kevin watched his colleagues' faces, the confusion, the sideways glances, the uncomfortable silence that filled the conference room. Everyone knew who really ran the technical operations, who stayed late to fix the unfixable, who turned theoretical concepts into working solutions. But Kevin's expression remained perfectly calm. While Mark explained Rachel's vision for the future and her innovative approach to leadership, Kevin was thinking about the envelope, about the documentation he'd been gathering for 3 months, about the phone call he'd made to his lawyer 2 weeks ago, about the email scheduled to send automatically if he didn't log in to cancel it within 48 hours. Rachel accepted her promotion with the grace of someone who'd never doubted she deserved it. She thanked the team for their support and collaboration, promised to leverage synergies for optimal outcomes, and used enough corporate buzzwords to fill a bingo card. Kevin noticed she avoided making eye contact with him, though whether from guilt or indifference, he couldn't tell. After the meeting, Kevin's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. How did the promotion announcement go, sweetheart? Dad and I are so proud of everything you've accomplished. Kevin stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Things didn't go as expected, Mom. I'll call you tonight. That afternoon, Kevin found himself back in Mark's office, but this time, the dynamic was different. This time, Kevin held all the cards, even though Mark didn't know it yet. The manila envelope sat in Kevin's lap, containing 8 months of documentation that would rewrite the narrative of TechFlow Solutions' recent success story. Thanks for everything, Mark, Kevin said, his voice steady and professional. I've learned a lot working here. He placed the envelope on Mark's desk with deliberate precision. This is my resignation, effective immediately. Mark's confident smile faltered. Kevin, let's not be hasty. I know you're disappointed, but there's no disappointment here, Kevin interrupted gently. Just clarity. He stood up, straightening his jacket. You'll want to read the whole thing, especially the last page. It explains everything you need to know about my decision. As Kevin walked toward the door, Mark's voice followed him. What exactly is in this resignation letter, Kevin? Kevin paused at the threshold, turning back with a smile that held 8 years of accumulated knowledge. The truth, Mark. Just the truth. Then he walked out of TechFlow Solutions for the last time, leaving behind an envelope that would soon become the most important document Mark Thompson had ever received. What Mark couldn't see was the second envelope Kevin had prepared, the one already in the hands of a very interested journalist at TechCrunch, along with a third copy sitting in a lawyer's office downtown. The dominoes were already falling. Mark just didn't know it yet. But that night, as Kevin helped Emma with her math homework for the first time in months, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys really do win in the end. The TechCrunch article hit like a digital earthquake at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. How Silicon Valley's diversity, hiring masks, old boys club nepotism, spread across social media faster than Kevin had anticipated. By 8 a.m., his phone was buzzing with notifications as former colleagues, industry contacts, and complete strangers shared the exposé that detailed TechFlow's systematic promotion of unqualified candidates based on personal connections rather than merit. Sarah found Kevin at the kitchen table, coffee growing cold as he scrolled through the coverage. The article's everywhere, she said, sliding into the chair beside him. LinkedIn, Twitter, even my mom's Facebook feed. She paused, studying his face. How are you feeling about all this? Kevin looked up from his phone, where dozens of messages from reporters, headhunters, and former colleagues were pouring in. Like I can finally breathe, he admitted. For the first time in 8 years, I feel like I'm not carrying someone else's lies. The ripple effects were immediate and devastating. TechFlow's stock price dropped 12% in pre-market trading as investors absorbed the implications of the investigative piece. The article didn't just expose Rachel's unqualified promotion. It revealed a pattern of nepotism that had affected dozens of employees over multiple years, all documented with Kevin's meticulous evidence gathering. But Kevin's plan had been more sophisticated than simple revenge. The anonymous source quoted extensively in the article, a current TechFlow engineer with access to internal communications, was actually Tom Wilson, Kevin's former teammate who had been documenting similar injustices for months. Together, they had built an airtight case that even TechFlow's expensive legal team couldn't dispute. Emma bounded into the kitchen, backpack already on her shoulders. Daddy, you're still here. She wrapped her arms around his neck. Are you going to drive me to school today? Every day from now on, sweetheart, Kevin promised, meaning it. Daddy's got a new job that values family time. As they drove to Emma's school, she chattered about her upcoming science fair project, while Kevin marveled at how different the world looked when you weren't constantly stressed about workplace politics. His phone buzzed with another message, this time from Mark Thompson, the fourth attempt to reach him since yesterday. The message was desperate. Kevin, we need to talk. There are things you don't understand about the pressure I was under. Please call me. Kevin deleted the message without responding. Some bridges were meant to burn. At Innovate Tech, Kevin's new workplace, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. The CEO, Janet Chen, was a former colleague who had left TechFlow 3 years earlier under similar circumstances. She had built Innovate Tech specifically as an antidote to the toxic corporate cultures that dominated Silicon Valley. How's your first week treating you? Janet asked during their morning check-in. Kevin's new role as Chief Technology Officer came with a 40% salary increase, equity options, and something even more valuable, respect for his expertise. It's surreal, Kevin admitted. Yesterday, I suggested implementing automated code reviews to improve quality control, and instead of explaining why it wouldn't work, everyone asked how we could make it happen faster. Janet laughed. Imagine that. A workplace where good ideas are actually welcomed. Revolutionary concept. But while Kevin was building something positive, TechFlow was experiencing its own revolution. A chaotic dismantling of everything they'd built on false foundations. The legacy systems that Kevin had designed and maintained for 8 years began experiencing mysterious glitches that perfectly coincided with Rachel's attempts to demonstrate her technical leadership. The first major failure occurred during Rachel's presentation to the board about Q3 projections. As she clicked through slides explaining the optimizations she'd implemented, the main database connection timed out, displaying error messages that referenced code modules only Kevin understood. Rachel's face went white as she frantically clicked refresh, mumbling technical terms she clearly didn't comprehend. Perhaps we should reschedule when our systems are more stable, suggested board member Patricia Walsh, her tone suggesting she wasn't buying Rachel's explanations about unexpected server loads. Meanwhile, Kevin's inbox was flooded with LinkedIn messages from TechFlow employees. Current engineers were reaching out privately, sharing their own stories of witnessing Kevin's work being attributed to others. Former employees were thanking him for finally exposing what they'd been too afraid to report themselves. One message particularly stood out from David Park, a senior developer who'd left TechFlow 6 months earlier. I wanted to report what I saw happening to you, but I had a family to feed and couldn't risk being blacklisted. Thank you for having the courage I didn't have. The FBI involvement came as a surprise, even to Kevin. Apparently, one of the whistleblower reports had triggered an investigation into potential violations of federal employment discrimination laws. When Kevin's lawyer called to inform him that the Department of Labor and Equal Employment Opportunity Commission were opening formal investigations, Kevin felt the weight of unintended consequences. I just wanted fair treatment, Kevin told his lawyer during their conference call. I never intended to bring federal agencies into this. Kevin, what you documented represents systematic discrimination that potentially affected hundreds of employees over multiple years, his lawyer explained. This is bigger than just your situation now. Emma was working on her science fair project when Kevin got home that evening. A demonstration of how small actions can create big changes, using dominoes arranged in elaborate patterns. "Look, Daddy," she called out as he walked through the door. "When I push this one little domino, it makes all the others fall down." Kevin watched the cascade of falling dominoes and couldn't help but smile at the metaphor. "That's exactly right, sweetheart. Sometimes one small action can change everything." The breaking point for TechFlow came during the following week's all-hands meeting. Rachel, attempting to address growing concerns about system stability, made the critical error of trying to explain technical concepts she'd only heard Kevin discuss in meetings. When an engineer in the back asked her to clarify the difference between asynchronous and synchronous processing, Rachel's response was so fundamentally wrong that several people visibly cringed. "Maybe we should bring Kevin back to consult on these issues," suggested Maria Santos, one of the few engineers who'd always been fair to Kevin. The suggestion was met with murmurs of agreement throughout the room. Rachel's face flushed red. Kevin Anderson his departure was, "We have everything under control." But they didn't have anything under control. Major clients began questioning TechFlow's technical capabilities after the Omega project experienced significant downtime due to patches that Rachel had approved without understanding their implications. The system that Kevin had built to be virtually bulletproof was failing under management that didn't comprehend its complexity. Kevin learned about the client defections through industry newsletters and professional networks. Companies that had worked with TechFlow for years were quietly shopping for new technology partners. The ripple effects of incompetent leadership were destroying relationships Kevin had spent years building. 2 weeks after the TechCrunch article, Linda Harrison herself appeared in the lobby of Innovate Tech. Security called Kevin's office to inform him that someone was asking to speak with him urgently. When Kevin saw Linda through the glass doors, he almost didn't recognize her. The confident executive who had orchestrated his marginalization looked haggard and desperate. Sarah had picked up Emma from school, worried about potential retaliation. But Kevin felt no fear as he met Linda in Innovate Tech's conference room. If anything, he felt curious about what had driven her to this unprecedented step. "Kevin, I need you to understand something," Linda began without preamble. The board was pressuring all department heads to increase diversity metrics. I was between a rock and a hard place. Kevin leaned back in his chair, studying the woman who had helped engineer his professional humiliation. "And your solution was to promote someone completely unqualified?" "Rachel had the right credentials on paper," Linda protested. "I thought she could grow into the role with proper mentoring." "Credentials that turned out to be fabricated," Kevin replied calmly. "Your due diligence was apparently as thorough as your understanding of what my team actually does." Linda's composure cracked. "Look, I made mistakes. We all did. But this investigation is going to destroy careers of people who were just trying to navigate an impossible situation. There's something bigger happening here. A network of companies that share information about employees who file complaints. If you keep pushing this, they'll make sure you never work in tech again." Kevin felt a chill, but not of fear. If Linda was resorting to threats, it meant the investigation was uncovering more than just TechFlow's problems. "Are you suggesting there's some kind of an industry conspiracy to silence whistleblowers?" "I'm saying you have a choice," Linda replied, sliding a folder across the table. "Take this offer. Board position, double your current salary, stock options, and help us rebuild TechFlow the right way. Or continue this crusade and find yourself fighting battles you never signed up for. Kevin didn't touch the folder. You know what's interesting about your offer? It's the first time anyone from TechFlow has suggested I might actually have value to the company. Took a federal investigation and public humiliation to reach that conclusion. Kevin, please. I have people depending on me. Employees with families, mortgages, kids in college. If TechFlow goes under because of this investigation, then maybe TechFlow deserves to go under, Kevin interrupted. And maybe those employees deserve to work for companies that value their contributions instead of their networking abilities. Linda left without the folder, her final words hanging in the air. You have no idea what you've started. But Kevin did know. The folder she'd left contained evidence of what she'd claimed didn't exist. Documentation of an informal network of Silicon Valley companies that shared information about problem employees. The conspiracy Kevin had stumbled into was much larger than TechFlow's petty office politics. That evening, Kevin sat with Emma as she practiced piano, the simple melody of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star filling their living room. Sarah joined them on the couch, curling up against Kevin's shoulder. No regrets? Sarah asked quietly. Kevin thought about the question seriously. His actions had cost him 8 years of professional relationships, triggered federal investigations that might destroy his former company, and apparently put him on some kind of industry blacklist. But watching Emma's concentrated face as she played her simple song, he knew exactly what his answer was. Not one, he said, kissing the top of Sarah's head. Not a single one. The congressional hearing invitation arrived the following Monday. Representative Maria Gonzalez, chair of the House Subcommittee on Technology and Innovation, was requesting Kevin's testimony about workplace discrimination in the technology sector. The letter explained that his case had become a catalyst for broader examination of hiring and promotion practices across Silicon Valley. As Kevin read the formal invitation, Emma climbed into his lap. Daddy, what's that important letter about? It's about making sure other daddies and mommies get treated fairly at work, Kevin explained, thinking about all the other talented people who had been overlooked, undermined, or driven out of companies for the crime of prioritizing merit over politics. Like when Tommy's mom got the promotion she deserved at her job, Emma asked, referencing her friend's mother, who had recently been promoted after years of being passed over. Exactly like that, Kevin confirmed, realizing that his story was already inspiring changes beyond TechFlow. Industry publications were reporting on companies proactively reviewing their promotion processes, implementing blind review systems, and establishing clear criteria for advancement. Business schools had begun incorporating the TechFlow case study into their ethics curricula. HR departments across the country were examining their own practices to avoid becoming the next cautionary tale. Kevin's decision to fight back had accidentally triggered a movement toward transparency and accountability that was spreading throughout corporate America. 6 months later, Kevin stood before the congressional subcommittee, his testimony broadcast live on C-SPAN and streaming across social media platforms. Emma and Sarah sat in the gallery, watching as Kevin calmly explained how systematic bias in hiring and promotion decisions was wasting human capital and undermining American competitiveness. The question isn't whether companies should value diversity, Kevin told the packed hearing room. The question is whether we're going to achieve diversity through excellence or through shortcuts that ultimately harm everyone involved. His testimony led to proposed federal legislation requiring transparency in promotion decisions at companies receiving government contracts. The Kevin Protocol, as it became known informally, mandated clear criteria for advancement and documentation of decision-making processes. TechFlow had been sold to a competitor 6 months after Kevin's resignation, its brand too damaged to recover. Rachel was working at an entry-level position at a small startup, her fabricated credentials finally catching up with her. Mark Thompson had left the industry entirely, opening a small consulting firm focused on ethical business practices. But the real victory wasn't in anyone's downfall. It was in the messages Kevin received daily from engineers, project managers, and executives across the country who were implementing fair promotion systems in their own organizations. People who had been inspired to speak up about their own experiences with workplace bias. Companies that were discovering the competitive advantage of actually promoting their best performers instead of their best networkers. On Emma's 9th birthday, Kevin was there for the entire party. No emergency meetings, no critical system failures, no corporate politics demanding his immediate attention. As he watched Emma blow out her candles, surrounded by friends and family, he thought about the wish he would have made 2 years ago, just to be treated fairly at work. Now his wish was simpler and more profound, that Emma would grow up in a professional world where talent mattered more than connections, where hard work led to recognition, and where standing up for what's right wasn't considered revolutionary. "What did you wish for, sweetheart?" Sarah asked as Emma finished cutting her cake. Emma grinned, chocolate frosting on her chin. "I wish that everyone could be as happy as Daddy is now." Kevin pulled his daughter close, realizing that sometimes the best revenge is simply building something better than what came before. The envelope that had started everything was just paper and ink, but the movement it had sparked was changing lives across the country. And in the end, that was worth every sacrifice he'd made along the way.